A lien on my house. You can't do this. This is completely outrageous.
The association has the right to collect unpaid dues as outlined in the covenants.
I bought that house because it was the only place no one wanted. And because I was a single mother with 2 kids, that made it the only place I could afford. My name is Emily Carter, and that tired little corner lot house wasn't pretty, but it was mine. No HOA dues. No permission slips to live my life. No strangers telling my kids how loud their laughter was allowed to be. And that detail, that mattered more than anything. The house sat right on the edge of a shiny new subdivision called Willow Creek Estates. Perfect lawns, matching mailboxes, one giant entrance sign listing community standards, which really meant don't stand out. My house came before all of that. The property line literally stopped at my side yard. The county knew it. The title company knew it. My deeds screamed it in bold, boring legal language. Not part of the HOA. That's why my mortgage was survivable. No pool I couldn't use, no clubhouse I'd never step inside, just a roof, a driveway, and a chance. So when life finally slowed down for one weekend, I did something small, but joyful. I painted my front door. Not neon. Not outrageous. Just a warm, bold blue that made me smile every time I pulled into the driveway. My kids helped. They picked a welcome mat. They insisted on a plant they swore they'd water forever. They lasted 6 days. For the first time since buying the house, it didn't feel like a fixer-upper. It felt like a home. 2 days later, I found a letter taped to my door. Notice of violation. I laughed at first because obviously it was a mistake. It said I had violated HOA exterior color guidelines and had 10 days to fix it before fines began. I read it again. And again. Then I felt it. That feeling when reality tilts sideways. Across the street, standing on the HOA side of the road, was a woman watching me. Perfect posture. Clipboard tucked under her arm. Sunglasses on, even though the sun was barely trying. She looked like the kind of woman who treated authority as a hobby. I walked toward her holding the notice. "Hi," I said. "I think this was left at the wrong house. I'm not in the HOA." She didn't blink. "Yes, you are." I actually laughed. "No, I'm not." She straightened slightly. "I'm Linda Hawthorne, HOA president, and your home is within our community." I pointed down the street toward the giant entrance sign. "My house isn't in your subdivision. It existed before it." She smiled, tight and satisfied. "It's been annexed." I stared at her. "Annexed by who?" "By the board," she said calmly. "We brought your property into compliance." My brain stalled. "You can't just adopt my house." Her smile hardened. "You should read your neighborhood bylaws." "I don't have bylaws," I said. "I have a mortgage." She laughed softly, like I was adorable. "We'll see." And then she walked away. Just like that. That night after the kids went to bed, I pulled out the folder. Every single mom has one. Deeds, surveys, closing documents. Because if you don't, life punishes you randomly. And there it was. Clear. Undeniable. Unarguable. My lot was not part of Willow Creek Estates. Not even close. So I copied everything. Highlighted the boundaries, put it in an envelope, and the next day I walked it straight to Linda Hawthorne's front door. She took it like it might infect her. "I'll review it," she said. I believed her. That was my mistake. Because a week later, another notice appeared on my door. And this time, it wasn't about the paint. It was about my trash can. What started as a misunderstanding was about to turn into a paper war. One that would threaten Emily's home, her credit, and her children's future. The second notice showed up on a Tuesday morning, taped crookedly to my front door like it had been slapped there in a hurry. Improper storage of containers. Trash receptacle visible from street. It was garbage day. I stared at it with my coffee going cold in my hand, trying to decide whether to laugh or scream. The trash truck was literally scheduled for the next hour. Every house on my side of the street had their bin out, but mine, apparently, was a problem. That was the moment it stopped feeling like a mistake. This wasn't about a door color. This was about control. I snapped a photo of the notice, peeled it off, and did what any exhausted adult does when someone starts gaslighting them with paperwork. I wrote an email. Subject line, not part of HOA, please stop. Short, polite, professional. I attached a scanned copy of my deed, a highlighted survey, and a simple sentence explaining that my property was not, and never had been, part of Willow Creek Estates. 2 days later, I got a reply. One sentence. Your property is subject to community standards. No signature. No explanation. No acknowledgement of the documents. Just a statement, like if they said it enough times, it would become true. Then the notices multiplied. One for my kids' bikes on the porch. One for unsightly items, because my daughter left chalk near the steps. One for non-compliant seasonal daycare, because my kids had taped paper ghosts to the front window. Paper ghosts? I wanted to laugh, but my kids saw my face when I read that one. Is that the mean lady mail again? My youngest asked. I nodded. She sighed like someone twice her age. She doesn't like fun. I started keeping everything. Photos, emails, dates, times. And then, almost as an afterthought, I installed a cheap outdoor camera. Originally, it was because someone in the area had been stealing packages, but it turned out to be the smartest decision I made. Because Linda Hawthorne escalated. She began doing slow drive-bys. I'd be washing dishes and see her car creep past my house like she was counting imperfections. Once I came home from work and found her standing on the sidewalk with a clipboard, openly inspecting my yard like she owned it. Can I help you? I asked. She didn't look up. Your vehicle is too close to the curb. I laughed. I genuinely thought she was joking. She looked at me sharply. This is not funny. Your vehicle is obstructing the visual line of the street. I'm parked in my driveway, I said. You're angled. It's an angled driveway. She wrote something down anyway. You know I'm not in your HOA, right? I said. We've already done this. She looked at me the way a gym employee looks at someone who forgot to scan in. You benefit from our community. I benefit from a public sidewalk, I said. You use public roads. She snapped, that's not the point. And that's when I understood. The point was obedience. My house didn't match. My kids existed loudly. My door was blue. And worst of all, I didn't answer to her. Over the next month, the violations turned absurd. Grass height. Address numbers not clearly visible. Outdoor items not harmonized with community aesthetics. My address numbers were old but readable. The mailman had no trouble. The city had no trouble. Only Linda did. I responded to every notice the same way. Calm. Brief. With attachments. My property is not part of your HOA. Please stop. One afternoon, an older man from the HOA side stopped while walking his dog. She doing it again? He asked quietly. I nodded. He sighed. She ran another family off a few years back. Edge lot like yours, fines, collections they paid just to make it stop. Moved not long after. My stomach dropped. This wasn't new. This was a pattern. A week later, it became real. A letter arrived, not taped to my door. Mailed from a collections agency. $4,800 owed in unpaid HOA fines and administrative fees. I felt my hands start to shake. I'm not rich, I budget carefully, I survive. But $4,800 isn't nothing, it's panic money, it's what-if money. I called the number immediately. I'm not part of an HOA, I said too fast. This is a mistake. The woman on the line sounded bored. Ma'am, we have an account in your name. If you wish to dispute it, you'll need to provide documentation. So I did. I sent everything. Deed, survey, timeline, photos, emails, a PDF thick enough to qualify as light cardio. Then I checked the county records. And that's when my chest went cold. Because there it was. A recorded lien. Against my house. A lien wasn't just harassment anymore. It was a legal weapon. And someone had just aimed it at Emily's home. I didn't even know what a lien really meant until I saw it attached to my address on the county website. It wasn't dramatic. No flashing warning. Just a dry legal entry with my name and my home's legal description, like someone had quietly written a claim on my life in black ink. Claim of lien recorded. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the screen, my coffee untouched, my hands numb. A lien isn't a fine you argue about. It's not a nasty letter you throw away. It can mess with your mortgage, your credit, your ability to refinance, your ability to sell. It felt like someone had tagged my house and said, "This is mine now, too." The kids were in the living room laughing at a cartoon, completely unaware that my brain had already jumped to worst-case scenarios. What if my lender notices? What if this complicates escrow? What if I ever need to refinance? What if I lose the one thing I worked myself to exhaustion to secure, because a woman with a clipboard didn't like my front door? That was the moment I stopped trying to handle it alone. I found a local real estate attorney and booked the earliest appointment I could get. When I explained everything, slowly this time, there was a pause on the other end of the line. "You're saying they recorded a lien against your property," the attorney said, "even though your lot is not part of their HOA. Yes. Do you have your deed and your survey? Yes. Another pause then. If that's true, this is going to be a serious problem for them. Those words hit differently than anything else I'd heard in months. The attorney moved fast. They pulled my deed. They pulled the HOA's recorded declaration. They pulled the subdivision documents. And when they compared everything, the answer was immediate and absolute. Your lot is explicitly excluded, the attorney said. Not only are you not part of the HOA, their own documents define the boundary and you're outside of it. So how did they file a lien? I asked. The attorney let out a short, humorless laugh. County recorders don't verify truth. If the paperwork is formatted correctly, they record it. People file nonsense all the time. That doesn't make it valid. Hearing that didn't calm me. It made me angry. Because that meant Linda Hawthorne hadn't made a mistake. She had knowingly filed a legal claim against my home without any authority. The attorney drafted a cease and desist letter that afternoon, sent to the HOA and the collections company. It laid everything out in clean, terrifying legal language. My property was not subject to HOA covenants. The lien was wrongful. All enforcement must stop immediately. Continued action would result in legal damages. The collections company backed off within 24 hours. The HOA did not. 2 days after the certified letter was delivered, signature required, I found another notice taped to my door. But this one was different. No trash cans. No bikes. Notice of intent to foreclose. The words were bold, aggressive, designed to scare. It claimed continued violations, and stated the HOA would proceed with foreclosure if compliance was not achieved. Foreclosure on a house they did not own, against a woman who was not their member. I forwarded it to my attorney and sent the camera footage too. The footage showed Linda clearly, walking up, looking straight into the camera, and tapping the notice to my door like she was delivering a threat in daylight. My attorney's reply was short. Okay, if they want to play, we play. Step 1 was forcing the LIEN release. Step 2 was making sure this never happened again. The attorney contacted the HOA's management company, the professional administrators behind the scenes. Their response was predictable: we act on board direction. Translation: don't blame us. So the attorney contacted the board members directly. And suddenly the tone changed. Because once the word liability enters a conversation, people start reading attachments. Within a week, I received my first email from someone who was Linda, another board member asking for clarification. I replied with a single PDF. No emotion. No rant. Just facts. My deed. My survey. Their declaration. A timeline of harassment. I didn't attend the board meeting they scheduled after that. I wasn't invited anyway. But my attorney did something better. They requested every document the HOA had relating to my property. Any annexation record. Any board vote. Any amendment. Anything. And that's when the truth became impossible to hide. There was no annexation. No vote. No amendment. Just Linda deciding my house offended her and acting like that was law. Then I found a handwritten note shoved between my doors. No envelope. No stamp. You will regret making enemies. Signed, Linda Hawthorne. I stared at it for 3 seconds. Then I slid it into a plastic sleeve like it was evidence, because that's exactly what it was. That note was the moment everything shifted. Because now this wasn't just harassment. It was personal. And it was about to get very expensive. Linda had crossed from nuisance to liability. And the next move wouldn't be paperwork, it would be court. The lawsuit wasn't dramatic. There were no raised voices or courtroom scenes at first. No gavels, no speeches. Just documents. Cold, heavy documents that carried consequences. My attorney filed the complaint quietly, the way professionals do when they already know the facts are on their side. It wasn't about revenge. It was about the LIEN and the damage it could have caused if I hadn't caught it in time. False LIEN. Harassment. Abuse of authority. Once it was filed, something changed in the air. The HOA hired their own attorney. And I'm willing to bet the very first question that attorney asked was a simple one. Is her property actually in the HOA? Because after that, everything shifted. Emails that used to take weeks suddenly got answered in hours. The tone went from aggressive to cautious. From we will enforce to we are reviewing the situation. The HOA's management company reached out to my attorney with what they called a courtesy offer. They would release the LIEN. As a courtesy, my attorney didn't even entertain it. We are past courtesy, they replied. We are discussing settlement. Because releasing the LIEN didn't erase the damage. It didn't erase the stress, the legal fees, or the fact that someone had threatened foreclosure on a single mother's home without any legal basis. Behind the scenes, my attorney requested records. Not opinions. Not explanations. Records. Internal emails. Board instructions. Fine calculations. Authorization to record the lien. And when those documents came in, a pattern appeared. Everything pointed back to one person. Linda Hawthorne. She had issued the notices. She had pushed the management company. She had authorized collections. She had signed off on recording the lien. One board member email stood out. We trusted the president's representation that the property was annexed. Annexed? That word again. But here's the thing about authority. It only exists on paper. And there was no paper. No annexation vote. No recorded amendment. No legal inclusion of my lot. Just assumption and ego. The HOA's attorney must have realized it too, because suddenly there was a strong desire to make this go away quietly. A settlement meeting was proposed. I asked my attorney the one question that mattered. Can they force me into the HOA? No, they said, and they won't try. So I agreed. Not because I wanted to sit across from them, but because I wanted this finished correctly. The settlement discussions were awkward. On one side, me, a woman who bought a house she could afford and painted her door blue. On the other, a group of people realizing that one board member's unchecked authority had just put all of them at legal risk. Because if I sued and won, the HOA's insurance could get involved. Dues could increase. Depositions could happen. And no one wants to spend a Saturday answering questions under oath because someone else went on a power trip. Eventually, the terms were laid out. Clear, written, non-negotiable. The HOA would release the lien immediately. Formally acknowledge my property was never part of the HOA. Notify the collections agency that the debt was invalid. Pay my attorney's fees. Compensate me for damages caused by the wrongful lien. And one more thing happened. Not in writing. Linda Hawthorne was removed from the board. It wasn't listed as a settlement condition. HOA politics don't work that way, but it didn't need to be. The board was terrified of her. Terrified she'd do this again. Terrified she'd drag them back into court. Once the settlement was signed and the lien officially released, I slept through the night for the first time in months. No phantom mail. No taped notices. Just silence. The kind that feels earned. The settlement money didn't make me rich. That wasn't the point. I paid off lingering debt. Fixed the fence my dog kept testing. Handled repairs I'd been postponing. And then I did something that made the whole fight feel worth it. I opened college savings accounts for my kids. Because no matter how hard someone tries to take stability from you, the real win is protecting what comes next. A week later, I painted the front door again. Same blue. Just brighter. Linda was gone, but the fallout wasn't over. Because when bullies lose power, they don't always go quietly. The neighborhood didn't explode when Linda Hawthorne was removed from the board. There were no signs. No announcements. No dramatic emails titled Important Update. But the silence told the story. The notices stopped. Not slowed. Not delayed. Stopped. For weeks my front door stayed clean. No tape marks. No envelopes. No passive-aggressive threats disguised as community standards. At first I didn't trust it. Every time I pulled into the driveway, I half expected to see another white sheet fluttering on my door like a bad omen. I kept checking the camera footage out of habit, like someone touching a bruise to see if it still hurt. But Linda was gone. The HOA's management company sent a formal letter confirming, again, that my property was not part of Willow Creek Estates and never had been. It included an apology written so carefully it felt like it had been approved by 3 lawyers and a risk management committee. It wasn't warm, but it was enough. The collections agency followed up with their own notice stating the account was closed and would not be reported to any credit bureau. I printed that email and put it in the folder with everything else. Because once you learn how quickly paper can turn into a weapon, you learn to keep armor. That should have been the end. But neighborhoods have memories. People started talking. At first it was small things. A wave from someone who'd never waved before. A neighbor stopping mid-walk to say, "I'm glad you stood up to her." Someone else quietly admitted they paid fines they never fully understood just to make Linda go away. One woman from the HOA side knocked on my door one afternoon, holding a plate of cookies like a peace offering. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have said something sooner." I believed her. Because fear is contagious, and Linda had been very good at spreading it. The strangest part was how empty her authority had been all along. Once it was gone, nothing replaced it. The HOA still existed. The lawns were still trimmed. The rules were still enforced, but reasonably. No drive-bys, no clipboard inspections, no obsession with children being visible. Power, it turns out, doesn't always come from rules. Sometimes it just comes from people not pushing back. A month later, I saw Linda for the first time since everything ended. She was walking, not driving, along the sidewalk near the subdivision entrance. No clipboard, no sunglasses, just a woman in sneakers staring straight ahead. She didn't look at my house. I don't think she could. Because it was still there. Still different. Still blue. And it always would be. That was the real victory. Not the settlement. Not the money. The fact that she never got what she wanted. Control. I made one last change after everything settled. I added a small plaque near my front door. Nothing flashy, just a simple metal sign. Private property, not part of HOA. It wasn't petty. It was preventive. Life went back to normal, or as normal as it gets when you're raising kids and fixing up a house one paycheck at a time. The kids stopped asking about the mean lady. I stopped jumping when the mail arrived. And one evening, while sitting on the porch watching the sun drop behind the houses that thought they owned the horizon, I realized something important. Linda didn't lose because I was loud. She lost because I was documented. Because when authority meets evidence, evidence wins. Every time. The war was over, but the lesson was just beginning. And Emily's story was about to help someone else stand up. After everything settled, I thought the hardest part was over. The LIEN was gone. The notices had stopped. Linda Hawthorne was no longer in charge of anything. But what surprised me most was what came after. People started reaching out. Not publicly. Not loudly. Privately. A message on Facebook from a woman 2 streets over. A quiet conversation at the mailbox. A knock on my door from someone who made sure no one was watching. They all said versions of the same thing. She did that to us too. We didn't know we could fight it. We were scared it would get worse. One couple told me they paid nearly $3,000 in fines over the years, not because they believed they were wrong, but because they were tired. Tired of letters, tired of threats, tired of feeling like their home wasn't really theirs. Another neighbor admitted they'd repainted their house twice because Linda didn't like the shade. Not because it violated rules. Because it violated her taste. That's when I understood something important. Linda didn't rely on rules. She relied on silence. Silence is cheaper than lawyers. Silence is faster than research. Silence feels safer until it is. Most people don't fight because fighting costs time, money, and emotional energy, especially when you have kids, especially when you're already stretched thin. Linda knew that. She picked targets carefully. Edge lots, busy families, people who didn't want conflict, people who would rather pay than escalate. And she almost got me too. If I hadn't checked county records, if I hadn't called an attorney, if I had believed that they must know what they're doing, I might have paid. That realization made me angry in a way I hadn't been before, not just for myself, but for everyone who came before me. A few neighbors asked me to explain what I did, how I handled it, what mattered. So I did. I told them the truth. I didn't win because I was brave. I won because I kept records. I took photos. I saved emails. I stayed boring and factual when someone else was emotional. Bullies thrive on reactions. Paperwork starves them. The HOA board quietly updated their processes after that. Notices now required multiple approvals. Any legal action required management company review. No single person could unilaterally decide someone's fate anymore. No one said Linda's name out loud. But everyone was thinking it. One afternoon, months later, I got a message from a woman I'd never met. She lived in a different town, different HOA, same problem. Her board was threatening fines over rules she wasn't even subject to. She'd found my story through a neighborhood group where someone mentioned, "Talk to Emily." She fought back. I walked her through it step by step. Deed, survey, boundaries. 2 weeks later, she messaged me again. They backed off. That message felt better than the settlement money ever did. Because here's the thing no one tells you when you buy a home. Ownership isn't just about paying a mortgage. It's about knowing where your authority begins and ends. And knowing when someone is lying to you with confidence. I didn't become anti-HOA. I became anti-abuse. Rules aren't the problem. Unchecked power is. One evening, my kids asked me why I kept all the documents in that big folder instead of throwing them away. I told them because sometimes proof is the only thing standing between you and someone who wants what you have. They nodded like they understood. Maybe they did. Because growing up watching someone stand their ground teaches lessons no lecture ever could. Emily's fight was over, but the story was about to reach thousands. And that visibility would bring one final reaction. I never heard from Linda Hawthorne again. No apology. No explanation. No angry voicemail or dramatic letter. And for a while, I wondered if that silence meant she'd learned something. Then I realized something else. Silence isn't always growth. Sometimes it's retreat. Months passed. Life filled the space the fight had taken. School projects, work deadlines, leaky faucets, normal things, the kind of normal you don't appreciate until it's gone. One afternoon, while scrolling through a neighborhood forum I hadn't visited in a while, I saw a familiar name. Not Linda's. Her sister. She was selling a house in a different subdivision, different HOA. And buried in the comments was a short exchange. Someone asking about the board. Someone warning, watch out, they used to have a president who went too far. No names. No details. Just enough. I closed the app and stared at the wall for a minute. Because bullies don't disappear. They relocate. They find new systems. New titles. New ways to feel important. The difference this time was simple. There were records. Stories. People who knew better now. A week later, I received an email that stopped me cold. It wasn't from Linda. It was from her personal account, forwarded by someone else. She had typed it, but never sent it. The subject line read, "Misunderstanding." The body was short. I was acting in what I believed to be the community's best interest. I regret how things were handled. I hope you can move on. No apology. No acknowledgement of harm. Just the familiar language of someone trying to rewrite the ending. I deleted it. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. Because the story didn't need her version anymore. The truth was already written, in county records, legal filings, and the quiet confidence of people who now knew their rights. That's when I finally understood something important. Closure doesn't always come from confrontation. Sometimes it comes from knowing someone can no longer touch your life. A few days later, my kids and I were sitting on the porch when my youngest asked a question that caught me off guard. "Mom," she said, "what happened to the mean lady?" I thought for a moment. "She lost the job that let her be mean," I said. "Did she get in trouble?" "Yes," I said, "but not because she was loud, because she was wrong." They nodded, satisfied. Because kids understand fairness better than most adults. That night I went back and read the first notice Linda had ever taped to my door. The paper was yellowed now, the tape marks faint. It felt small, insignificant. And that's when it hit me. The most dangerous lies don't come with shouting. They come printed in official-looking fonts, signed by people who expect you not to question them. Linda never sent that message because she didn't need forgiveness. She needed control. And she never got it. The story was over, but the message was just beginning. Because someone watching right now needs to hear this. If you're still watching this, then this story wasn't just entertainment for you. It was a warning. Because what happened to me doesn't start with a lien. It doesn't start with a foreclosure threat. It starts with a piece of paper and a person who assumes you won't question it. Most people don't. They see official language. They see authority. They panic. And that's exactly what people like Linda Hawthorne count on. They count on you being tired. They count on you being busy. They count on you thinking it's not worth the fight. That's how power gets abused quietly, without raised voices, without headlines. Just forms, deadlines, threats written in bold. I wasn't special. I didn't have connections. I didn't have extra money to burn. What I had was proof, and the willingness to stop being polite when politeness stopped working. This story isn't about hatting HOAs. It's about understanding them. Because rules aren't dangerous. Unchallenged authority is. If you own a home or plan to someday, there are 3 things you should take from this. First, know your documents. Your deed, your survey, your boundaries. If someone claims power over your property, the answer is always on paper. Second, document everything. Photos, emails, dates, times. Because feelings don't hold up under scrutiny, records do. Third, and this one matters most. Never assume someone has authority just because they act like they do. Linda acted confident. She acted official. She acted unstoppable. She was. And the moment someone challenged her with facts, the entire illusion collapsed. That's the part bullies hate. Not being yelled at. Being exposed. Since this all happened, I've heard from people across the country who faced similar situations. Some paid just to make it stop. Some are still dealing with it right now. If that's you, listen carefully. You are not crazy. You are not overreacting. And you are not powerless. And if this story made you angry, good. Anger is what pushes people to check records instead of writing checks. Now here where you come in. If you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare, or you're dealing with one right now, drop a comment, even if it's just I see you. If this story helped you understand your rights, even a little, hit the like button so more people see it. The algorithm doesn't care about fairness, but it does care about engagement. And if you don't want to miss stories like this, real stories where bullies get exposed by paperwork, subscribe. Right now. Not later. Not I'll remember. Right now. Because the next story might sound unbelievable until it happens to someone just like you. And trust me, it always does. Subscribe, comment, share. Because silence is what they count on, and today you're not giving it to them.